Only a small percentage of people who watch my videos are actually subscribed. So if you end up liking this video, consider subscribing. It's free, and you can always unsubscribe. Enjoy the video. In the grim darkness of the 41st millennium, there is only war. Yet, even in an age of unending conflict, there are worlds whose names are spoken only in hushed whispers. Worlds synonymous with sacrifice, with penitence, and with death. This is the story of one such world. A planet that was once a jewel of the Imperium, a bastion of industry and power. A planet that fell into the deepest damnation, betrayed by its own masters and corrupted from within. It is the story of a world that was deemed beyond saving, and so was condemned to the purest, most absolute fire. And it is the story of what came after, of what survived in the darkness, beneath a poisoned and irradiated wasteland. This is the story of an entire people who embraced their inherited guilt, who chose anonymity over identity, and who seek only one thing: to atone for the sins of their ancestors through endless, willing sacrifice in the God Emperor's name. This is the story of the planet Krieg and the birth of its Death Korps. Before the catastrophic civil war that would forever scar its name, the planet stood as one of the Imperium's most productive and strategically vital manufacturing worlds. Located within the Segmentum Solar, the very stellar region that housed Holy Terra itself, this world occupied a position of tremendous importance. Its proximity to the throne world and its location along major warp routes made it an indispensable hub for the Imperial war machine, a linchpin in the supply chains that sustained countless campaigns across the galaxy. The planet's surface bore the unmistakable, brutal marks of millennia of industrial exploitation. Massive hive cities stretched toward perpetually polluted skies, their towering spires disappearing into the perpetual smog clouds that blanketed the planet. These urban monuments to imperial industry housed billions of workers, their lives revolving entirely around the endless cycle of production demanded by the Emperor's war efforts. The largest of these settlements, Hive Ferrarad, dominated the northern continent. It was a sprawling cancer of manufacturing complexes and residential blocks that extended deep into the planet's crust. From orbit, the Hive appeared as a cancerous growth of metal and rockcrete, its surface bristling with countless smoke stacks, looming cooling towers, and the skeletal frameworks of cargo lifters that transported finished goods to the orbital stations above. This world's industrial capacity defied easy comprehension. The planet's foundries operated continuously, their forges never cooling as they transformed raw materials into the endless instruments of war that the Imperial forces required. Entire districts within each hive city specialized in specific types of production. The Munitorum sectors churned out millions of rounds of ammunition daily, from standard Lasgun power cells to the specialized, building-sized ordnance for heavy artillery pieces. The sounds of these facilities created a constant, industrial symphony that echoed through the hive corridors. The rhythmic hammering of automated presses, the hiss of cooling metals, and the mechanical grinding of assembly lines that never ceased their work. Vehicle production represented another cornerstone of this world's economic output. The planet's manufacturers produced legions of Lehman Russ battle tanks, swarms of Chimera armored personnel carriers, and countless variants of Imperial Guard vehicles that would serve on battlefields across the galaxy. These facilities required enormous spaces within the hives, their assembly floors stretching for kilometers as partially completed vehicles moved along production lines, operated by teams of skilled tech adepts and indentured workers. The quality of this vehicle production earned recognition throughout the Segmentum Solar. Many Imperial commanders specifically requested equipment bearing the planet's manufacturing stamps. The weapons foundries supplied not only individual armaments, but also the massive artillery pieces that defined Imperial Guard doctrine. These workshops produced Earthshaker cannons, Basilisk self-propelled guns, and the specialized siege equipment that Imperial forces employed in their endless campaigns of conquest and defense. The planet's artisans had developed particular expertise in creating durable, reliable weapons that could function in the harshest battlefield conditions. This reputation for quality extended to personal equipment as well, with its pattern of lost guns, flak armor, and field equipment becoming standard issue for numerous Imperial Guard regiments. Beyond finished military hardware, the planet served as a crucial supplier of raw materials and components that fed into the broader Imperial manufacturing network. The planet's deep mines extracted vast quantities of metal ores, rare earth elements, and industrial chemicals. These were processed in surface refineries before being shipped to other worlds. These mining operations extended far beneath the hive cities, creating a subterranean landscape of tunnels, processing facilities, and worker habitations that mirrored the surface settlements in their scale and complexity. The miners who labored in these depths formed a distinct class within the social hierarchy, their entire lives shaped by the dangerous work of extracting the materials that fueled the planet's industrial heart. The governance of this industrial powerhouse rested in the hands of a planetary nobility that had accumulated tremendous wealth and influence through their control of these manufacturing operations. These noble houses operated as feudal overlords of industry, each controlling specific sectors of production and maintaining private armies of security forces to protect their vast interests. The most powerful among them sat on the Planetary Council, which served as the world's primary governing body, all under the overall authority of the Imperial Governor. This system created a complex web of alliances, rivalries, and commercial relationships that determined how resources were allocated and production priorities were established. House Jerton commanded the largest share of vehicle manufacturing. Their foundries produced nearly 40% of the planet's armored vehicle output. The family's patriarch, Lord Commander Jaren, had built his power base through strategic marriages with other noble houses and the careful cultivation of relationships with off-world imperial officials. His manufactorums employed hundreds of thousands of workers and maintained exclusive contracts with several Space Marine chapters for specialized vehicle variants. The house's private security forces were equipped with military-grade weapons and vehicles, making them a formidable power within the planet's political landscape. House Voss controlled much of the ammunition production, operating vast complexes that supplied ordnance to Imperial forces throughout the segmentum solar. Their facilities specialized in exotic ammunition types, including specialized shells for Space Marine weapons and custom ordnance for particular campaign requirements. Lady Voss, the house's current leader, had even earned recognition from the Adeptus Mechanicus for her innovations in ammunition design and production efficiency. Her political influence extended beyond the world itself, with connections to Munitorum officials on Terra who relied on her facilities to meet critical supply requirements. The vital mining operations that provided the raw materials for all surface manufacturing fell under the control of House Nur. Their underground domain encompassed thousands of kilometers of tunnels and extraction sites. Lord Kastner maintained his own private army of tunnel fighters, who served both as security forces and as specialized military units capable of underground warfare. The house's wealth derived not only from its mining operations, but also from its control of the transportation networks that moved raw materials from the depths to the surface processing facilities. Smaller noble houses controlled the other specialized aspects of industrial output. House Meridian operated the planet's primary chemical processing facilities, producing the industrial compounds and specialized materials required for advanced manufacturing processes. House Corvanis managed much of the planet's food production, operating vast hydroponic facilities and protein synthesis plants that fed the billions of workers who sustained the industrial machine. And House Draconus controlled significant portions of the weapons manufacturing sector, their foundries producing the personal armaments that equipped Imperial Guard forces across multiple sectors. The social structure beneath this nobility consisted of multiple distinct classes, each with defined roles. The Tech Adepts represented the highest tier of non-noble society. Their expertise in maintaining and operating the complex manufacturing equipment made them indispensable. These servants of the Omnicia maintained close relationships with the noble houses while preserving their loyalty to Mars and the broader Adeptus Mechanicus. Their workshops and laboratories occupied privileged positions within the hive cities, and their recommendations carried significant weight. Skilled workers formed the backbone of the manufacturing operations. These individuals possessed specialized knowledge, maintained quality control standards, and trained new workers. They lived in dedicated residential sectors, their quarters modest but significantly better than those of the general laborers. Many belonged to hereditary guilds that maintained traditional techniques and served as intermediaries between the nobility and the broader worker population. And then there was the vast majority, the general laborers. Their lives revolved entirely around their assigned production duties. These workers lived in cramped blocks, deep within the hive cities, their daily routines dictated by shift schedules designed to maximize manufacturing output. Despite their billions, they possessed no political influence and depended entirely on the noble houses for employment, housing, and their basic necessities. The constant demand for increased production meant that working conditions remained harsh, with safety considerations often secondary to meeting quotas and deadlines. This was the world as it stood, powerful, productive, and proud. A fortress of industry, loyal to the Imperium. Or so it seemed. The corruption that would ultimately consume this world began not with dramatic proclamations of heresy or open displays of demonic power. It began through subtle infiltration and the gradual subversion of the planet's ruling elite. The chaos cults that took root among the noble houses operated with patience and cunning. They understood that a world of such strategic importance to the Imperium could not be turned through brute force alone. Instead, they employed the insidious methods that had proven effective on countless other worlds. They appealed to existing ambitions, exploited personal grievances, and offered forbidden knowledge to those who believed themselves deserving of greater power. The planet's integration into the broader imperial economy, its role as a logistics hub and trade partner, provided the very vector for this contamination. The initial stages of corruption manifested through seemingly innocuous social gatherings among the aristocracy. Private salons, hosted by various noble houses, became venues for philosophical discussions. These conversations gradually, carefully shifted from acceptable topics of governance and economics toward the more dangerous territories of imperial doctrine and the nature of authority itself. These conversations, guided by individuals who had already embraced heretical beliefs, planted seeds of doubt about the Imperium's right to demand such enormous sacrifices while offering little in return beyond protection from external threats. House Voss became the primary vector for this ideological contamination. Lady Voss had grown increasingly resentful of the Adeptus Munitorum's demands. These demands required her ammunition facilities to operate at maximum capacity while providing minimal compensation for the enormous resources consumed in production. Her frustration with imperial bureaucracy made her receptive to whispered suggestions that the noble houses deserved greater autonomy in determining how their world's industrial might should be employed. These conversations occurred during private meetings with off-world traders who claimed to represent alternative markets for military equipment. Individuals who spoke persuasively about the benefits of independence from imperial oversight. The corruption spread like a contagion through the established networks of political alliance and commercial partnership that connected the major noble houses. Lord Kastner of Hausner soon found himself drawn into these discussions about the true nature of power and the arbitrary restrictions that imperial law placed on planetary governors. His mining operations, deep in the planet's crust, had recently uncovered unusual mineral formations, crystalline structures that seemed to pulse with their own internal light and generated strange resonances when exposed to certain frequencies. The off-world advisors who had gained Lady Voss's confidence suggested that these discoveries represented opportunities for technological advancement that imperial doctrine would never permit him to explore. House Meridian's involvement began through their chemical processing operations. Certain production runs had yielded unexpected compounds, substances with properties that defied conventional understanding. The family's chief chemist reported substances that remained stable under conditions that should have caused immediate breakdown, and others that seemed to enhance the effectiveness of conventional explosives beyond all theoretical limits. When these anomalies were reported to their tech-adept supervisors, the responses indicated that such discoveries should be suppressed rather than investigated. This created a deep frustration among Meridian's technical staff, who believed they were on the verge of revolutionary breakthroughs. The gradual transformation of these noble houses involved the careful cultivation of their existing character flaws. Lady Vasa's pride in her technical innovations became twisted into contempt for imperial restrictions on weapons development. Lord Kastner's natural curiosity about the geological mysteries beneath his domain evolved into an obsession with the forbidden knowledge that promised to unlock the planet's hidden potential. House Meridian's scientific pursuits transformed into reckless experimentation with compounds that no loyal imperial citizen should have been willing to investigate. The trap was set. The rod had taken hold. As the conspiracy's influence spread, one man began to notice the inconsistencies. Colonel Jerton, commander of the Planetary Defense Forces and heir to House Jerton's industrial empire, first became aware of the growing conspiracy through routine security briefings. His position provided him access to intelligence reports that tracked the movement of personnel and materials, and these reports revealed unusual patterns in off-world communications. The data showed an increasing frequency of contact with worlds that had previously maintained only minimal trade relationships with the planet. The timing of these communications coincided with the private meetings among the other noble houses, creating a pattern that strongly suggested coordination with external influences. The colonel's investigation began cautiously. He used his authority over loyal elements of the planetary security forces to monitor communications and track the activities of suspected individuals, all without alerting them to his suspicions. His agents reported strange deliveries to the noble house compounds, shipments that arrived without proper documentation and were handled by personnel who refused to submit to standard security screenings. These materials were transported directly to private laboratories and workshops, where they disappeared from official inventory systems. It was clear the noble houses were conducting unauthorized research projects using unknown substances or technologies. Further investigation revealed that several key positions within the planetary government had been filled by individuals with questionable backgrounds and unexplained wealth. The new deputy governor, appointed through Lady Vasa's influence, had arrived with credentials that could not be verified through standard imperial channels. His previous service record contained gaps that coincided with campaigns in sectors where imperial forces had encountered significant chaos corruption. Similar patterns emerged among other recent appointments to critical administrative positions, creating a network of potentially compromised officials. Colonel Jerton's attempts to alert higher imperial authorities met with frustration and bureaucratic obstruction that seemed deliberately designed to prevent his concerns from reaching the appropriate officials. His reports to the Segmentum Solar Command structure vanished into administrative systems without generating responses or acknowledgments. Communications with the Adeptus Arbites were redirected through planetary government channels, where they could be intercepted and suppressed by the very officials whose loyalty he questioned. Even his attempts to contact the Space Marine chapters that maintained recruitment relationships with his world were blocked by communication protocols that required approval from the compromised planetary authorities. He was alone. The systematic purging of loyal Imperial officers began soon after. It started with seemingly routine personnel transfers and administrative reorganizations, all designed to remove potential threats to the growing conspiracy. Colonel Jerton watched helplessly as competent, loyal commanders were reassigned to distant postings or transferred to units where their influence would be minimized. The official justifications cited efficiency improvements and strategic restructuring, but the pattern clearly targeted individuals who had demonstrated unwavering loyalty to Imperial doctrine. Major Corrin, commander of the primary spaceport security forces, found himself transferred to a remote mining facility after questioning new protocols that reduced screening procedures for incoming vessels. His replacement, a recently arrived officer with impressive credentials but no verifiable service history, immediately implemented changes that allowed certain ships to bypass standard inspection procedures entirely. These vessels arrived at irregular intervals and departed quickly after unloading cargo that was transported directly to the Noble House facilities. Captain Vex, responsible for monitoring communications with other Imperial worlds, was reassigned to training duties after reporting anomalies in message routing that suggested the unauthorized interception of official correspondence. Her replacement proved remarkably incurious about these irregularities. The installation of chaos-corrupted leadership accelerated as the conspiracy gained confidence. These new officials gradually modified existing policies, creating opportunities for the corrupted noble houses to pursue their heretical agenda. The Planetary Council itself underwent a transformation. Traditional procedures were modified to allow for private sessions, where sensitive matters could be discussed without the presence of Imperial observers. These closed meetings became venues for planning the planet's eventual separation from Imperial authority. Industrial production schedules were subtly altered. Ammunition production shifted towards specialized ordnance types that incorporated the mysterious compounds discovered in House Meridian's laboratories, creating stockpiles of weapons with enhanced destructive capabilities. Vehicle manufacturing focused increasingly on variants designed for planetary defense rather than export to Imperial forces, building up a military capability that could be turned against the Imperium itself. The corruption extended into the administrative structure, the tech adepts, and the planetary defense forces. Loyal officers were replaced by individuals who prioritized allegiance to the ruling elite over service to the Emperor. Training exercises shifted, focusing on scenarios involving defense against impériale intervention. Security protocols were systematically weakened, reconfigured to focus on individuals who remained loyal to Imperial authority. The traitors were now hunting the faithful. The Declaration of Independence from the Imperium emerged as the logical culmination of months of careful preparation. The Planetary Council, now dominated by representatives of the corrupted noble houses, formally announced its withdrawal from Imperial jurisdiction during a closed session, excluding all remaining loyal officials. The declaration cited the Imperium's excessive demands on planetary resources and its failure to provide adequate compensation, presenting the rebellion as a justified response to Imperial exploitation, not an act of heretical treachery. The alignment with the ruinous powers was revealed gradually, as the planet's new leadership demonstrated the enhanced capabilities their forbidden research had produced, claiming them as technological breakthroughs the Imperium had suppressed. Colonel Jerton discovered the full extent of the conspiracy through intercepted communications that revealed the Council's secret declaration. His network of loyal intelligence operatives had managed to infiltrate the private communication channels used by the corrupted nobles, providing him with irrefutable evidence of their treason. The intercepted messages detailed plans for seizing control of the orbital defense platforms, neutralizing all remaining Imperial installations, and coordinating with off-world chaos forces that would provide military support. The colonel understood that all conventional channels were compromised beyond repair. The situation demanded immediate, violent action, using whatever loyal resources remained under his command. Even though such action would inevitably trigger the civil war the traitors had been preparing for, he had no choice. Jerton's first priority was securing the loyalty of the Imperial Guard regiment stationed on the planet. The 83rd Armored Regiment remained under the command of Colonel Vance, an officer whose unwavering devotion to Imperial doctrine had already made him a target for removal. Jerton's agents reached Vance through secure channels, providing him with the evidence and coordinating plans for resistance. The 83rd controlled significant armored assets, including 2 full companies of Lehman Russ battle tanks that would prove essential. The 127th Infantry Regiment was more complex. Its command structure had been partially compromised. However, Major Kellner, the regiment's second-in-command, had maintained contact with Jerton's network. He confirmed that several company commanders remained loyal, controlling approximately 3,000 troops. The planetary defense artillery units, however, posed a massive challenge. These installations controlled the massive Earthshaker cannons capable of devastating the Hive cities, and their crews had been systematically replaced with personnel loyal to the noble houses. Colonel Jerton established his primary command center in the deep industrial sectors of Hive Fararad, utilizing maintenance tunnels and abandoned manufacturing complexes that provided concealment. These underground facilities offered access to communication networks that had not yet been compromised, allowing the fragmented loyalist forces to coordinate their activities. The initial phase of open conflict began when traitor forces attempted to seize control of the primary spaceport facility. Colonel Jerton had anticipated this move. He positioned elements of Colonel Vance's 83rd Armored Regiment in concealed positions around the spaceport's perimeter. The traitor assault force, consisting of corrupted planetary defense troops and noble house private armies, advanced. Colonel Vance's armored units struck them during their approach, catching them in open terrain where the superior firepower and armor of the Lehman Russ battle tanks proved decisive. The Loyalist attack destroyed 12 traitor vehicles and scattered their infantry, forcing them into a full retreat. But the victory came at a significant cost. The 83rd lost 3 tanks and suffered casualties that could not be replaced, isolated as they were from all Imperial supply lines. The traitors' response revealed the true extent of their preparation. Within hours of the spaceport battle, artillery strikes from the corrupted defense installations began targeting known loyalist positions. The corrupted leadership possessed detailed intelligence about the resistance and the capability to coordinate complex military operations. These bombardments forced the loyalist units to abandon their prepared positions and retreat deeper into the urban maze of Hive Fararad's industrial sectors. Major Kellner's infantry forces proved effective in the urban warfare that followed. His troops possessed intimate knowledge of the Hive's layout, the maintenance passages, utility tunnels, and abandoned sections that could be used for concealment and rapid movement. They established observation posts and began sabotage operations against traitor supply lines. But the Loyalist forces quickly discovered that conventional military tactics were useless. The traitors possessed superior numbers, better access to supplies and reinforcements, and the ability to coordinate their operations through official channels. Direct confrontations consistently favored the traitor forces, who could concentrate overwhelming firepower against the isolated Loyalist units. Colonel Jerton adapted his strategy. He ordered a shift to full guerrilla warfare, employing tactics that exploited the Loyalists' advantages in mobility, local knowledge, and pure dedication. Small teams of infantry specialists began conducting raids against traitor supply convoys, targeting vehicles transporting ammunition and fuel. These attacks relied on detailed intelligence provided by sympathizers who remained hidden within the traitor administration. A sabotage campaign began, targeting power generation facilities, communication nodes, and transportation systems that supported the traitor military. These operations required careful planning to maximize disruption while avoiding civilian casualties. Colonel Jerton understood that maintaining popular support was essential. The battle for the Meridian Chemical Processing Complex illustrated both the potential and the limitations of these tactics. A joint force of Loyalist infantry and armor attempted to seize the facility to deny the traitors access to the exotic, chaos-enhanced compounds. The initial assault succeeded in penetrating the complex's outer defenses, but the Loyalists lacked sufficient numbers to hold their gains against the inevitable counterattack. The traitor response included not only conventional military forces, but also weapons that demonstrated the unnatural properties of their corrupted technology. The Loyalists were forced to withdraw after suffering significant casualties. Intelligence gathering became critical. Jerton's network provided valuable information, but the traitors' own capabilities improved as they consolidated control and began employing enhanced interrogation techniques that suggested the dark influence of their new masters. Supply shortages became the Loyalists' greatest challenge. Ammunition for the urban warfare operations quickly depleted. Medical supplies became particularly scarce, forcing the Loyalists to rely on improvised treatment centers hidden throughout the hive. Recruitment was both essential and dangerous. Many civilians who had initially supported the Declaration of Independence began to question their allegiance, as evidence of chaos corruption became more apparent through the traitors' increasingly brutal methods. But screening these recruits for double agents was a slow, perilous process. The traitor forces demonstrated their growing confidence through increasingly aggressive operations. They employed specialized forces equipped with detection equipment that seemed to operate beyond normal Imperial technology. Then, the final, horrifying realization began to dawn. Loyalist observers reported enemy units that continued fighting despite suffering casualties that should have been immediately fatal. They documented weapons that demonstrated destructive capabilities far beyond their apparent specifications. They noted coordination between traitor forces that suggested communication methods not dependent on conventional technology. Loyalist snipers documented clean, kill shots that failed to stop traitor soldiers, who continued their advance despite wounds that would have incapacitated any normal human. This was no longer a political rebellion. This was not even a standard heretical uprising. The corruption had progressed beyond the point of no return. It had begun to fundamentally alter the physical substance of the planet at a molecular level. Colonel Jerton's strategic assessment was grim. The Loyalist forces alone could not restore Imperial authority. The traitors' advantages in numbers, equipment, and supernatural enhancement made their eventual victory inevitable, unless external Imperial intervention could shift the balance. But he also knew that no message had escaped the planet. No one was coming to save them. Colonel Jerton made his decision. It was a choice born of the recognition that conventional military action could not purge the chaos taint that had infected the planet's population and its very infrastructure. The corruption was too deep. The planet could not be saved. It could only be purified. The theological justification for what was to come was firmly grounded in Imperial doctrine. The Codex Imperialis contained specific provisions authorizing military commanders to employ any means necessary to prevent the spread of heretical influence, including the complete sterilization of infected worlds. Imperial commanders had, in the past, chosen to destroy entire populations rather than risk allowing chaos corruption to escape containment. Colonel Jerton's access to the required arsenal stemmed from his unique position. As commander of the Planetary Defense Forces, he had oversight of strategic assets. As heir to House Jerton, his family's foundries had produced tactical nuclear devices for Imperial Guard siege operations for centuries. He had access to the stockpiles. The arsenal was vast. It included tactical devices with yields ranging from 5 to 50 kilotons, designed for battlefield deployment. It also included strategic warheads approaching 100 kilotons, and even larger devices reaching yields of several hundred kilotons, intended for use against hive-sized targets. The delivery systems were varied. Missile batteries positioned throughout the major hive cities, artillery pieces modified for nuclear shell deployment, and bomber squadrons based at Loyalist-controlled airfields. The systematic targeting of the major population centers began. Jerton's planning staff identified primary targets based on intelligence indicating the highest concentrations of traitor forces and corrupted civilian populations. Target 1. Hive Ferrarad. Its massive population and its role as the rebellion's administrative center made it the primary objective. Target 2. The northern industrial complex of Hive Corvanis. Intelligence indicated that House Corvanis had established major food production facilities that incorporated chaos-corrupted materials directly into the planetary food supply. This contamination of basic nutrition represented an insidious form of corruption that could spread the taint regardless of political allegiance. Target 3. Hive Kastner's mining operations. Their subterranean nature, and the reports of Lord Kastner's corrupted crystalline formations, suggested these tunnels might be serving as focal points for chaos corruption, channeling warp energies directly from the planet's foundation. The strikes here would use specialized penetrator warheads, Target 4. The Meridian Chemical Processing Complex. The exotic compounds discovered there suggested they might survive conventional nuclear destruction, potentially serving as seeds for renewed corruption. The targeting plan for this facility incorporated multiple, overlapping nuclear strikes to ensure the complete molecular destruction of all materials. The timing of the bombardment was coordinated to achieve maximum effectiveness. The simultaneous nature of the strikes would prevent communication between target areas and eliminate any possibility of an organized response. The launch sequence began. First, tactical strikes against traitor military installations to eliminate their command and control capabilities. Nuclear-tipped missiles targeted communication centers, military headquarters, and air defense platforms. The strategic bombardment of the major hive cities commenced within minutes. From loyalist-controlled areas, missile batteries launched their payloads. The weapons followed ballistic trajectories that would bring them to their targets in approximately 15 minutes. There was not enough time for any meaningful evacuation. Hive Farad received the heaviest concentration, 12 separate warheads. The primary administrative district, housing the corrupted Planetary Council, was struck by a 400-kiloton device. It vaporized the entire governmental complex and created a crater extending nearly 2 kilometers in diameter. The industrial sectors received multiple smaller warheads, creating overlapping radiation zones. The detonation sequence transformed Hive Farad into a hellscape of nuclear fire and radiation. The initial strikes generated an electromagnetic pulse that disabled all electronic systems, plunging the massive structure into darkness seconds before the thermal effects arrived. The nuclear fireballs expanded rapidly through the hive's corridors, their temperatures exceeding those found in stellar cores, instantly vaporizing everything within their reach. The pressure waves that followed collapsed the structural supports, bringing down the entire hive superstructure. Hive Corvanis experienced similar devastation from 8 nuclear warheads. The corrupted food production facilities disappeared in nuclear fire, their contaminated products reduced to radioactive ash. The hive's residential sectors, housing millions of civilians who had been exposed, were completely obliterated. The mining complexes of Hive Kastner were struck by the penetrator warheads, which bored deep into the planet's crust before detonating. The underground explosions collapsed thousands of kilometers of mining tunnels, burying the mysterious crystalline formations under millions of tons of irradiated rock. The Meridian Chemical Processing Complex received the most intensive bombardment, subjected to nuclear temperatures and radiation levels that ensured no trace of the chaos-corrupted materials could survive. Secondary targets across the surface were hit. Noble house compounds, transportation networks, bridges, and tunnels were all severed by tactical nuclear weapons. The immediate aftermath transformed the thriving industrial world into a radioactive wasteland where survival became virtually impossible. The massive explosions had injected enormous quantities of radioactive material into the planet's atmosphere, creating fallout clouds that would spread across the entire surface. An atmospheric shroud of radioactive dust blocked out the sun. A nuclear winter began, causing immediate climate changes that eliminated most forms of surface vegetation within months. The planet's weather patterns were fundamentally altered, creating constant storms that carried lethal radioactive particles across the globe. The destruction of the major hive cities eliminated approximately 90% of the planet's population within the first few hours. The scattered survivors, who had been located in deep underground facilities or remote areas, faced a new reality. They were isolated in a hostile environment where the very air and soil had become lethal. The surviving loyalist forces accepted the nuclear bombardment. The evidence of supernatural enhancement among the traitors had convinced them that nuclear purification was the only viable method. Their world had been sacrificed to preserve the Imperium. The radioactive transformation would persist for millennia, a permanent reminder of the price of heresy. The nuclear wasteland became a monument to the absolute dedication required to serve the Emperor and the willingness of true Imperial citizens to sacrifice their entire world rather than allow the forces of chaos to achieve victory. The nuclear holocaust created an environment so hostile that survival required immediate adaptation to conditions unlike anything previously encountered in Imperial history. The scattered groups of loyalist forces who had taken shelter in the deepest underground facilities faced the grim reality that their world had been transformed into a radioactive tomb. The massive bunker complexes that had served as emergency command centers and storage facilities became the only habitable spaces on the planet. The Fararad Deep Command Complex, Colonel Jerton's headquarters, housed approximately 8,000 survivors in facilities designed for half that number. The bunker's life support systems struggled to filter the radioactive particles that infiltrated even the most sophisticated purification equipment. Emergency rations intended for weeks were stretched to cover months. The Corvani's mining shelter faced even worse conditions. 3,000 individuals crowded into hastily converted industrial storage areas, sleeping in shifts due to insufficient space. Their water recycling systems, originally designed to process industrial coolants, required constant maintenance to produce potable water from the contaminated groundwater. The Kastner Deep Works represented the largest surviving population, with nearly 12,000 individuals sheltering in the extensive mining tunnels. The natural protection of hundreds of meters of solid rock offered superior radiation shielding, but the improvised nature of the facilities created constant challenges in maintaining order and distributing resources. The initial weeks revealed the extent of the challenges. Radiation monitoring equipment indicated that surface levels remained lethal. The atmospheric contamination meant that even brief exposure would cause fatal radiation poisoning within days. The psychological impact of total isolation proved as challenging as the physical hardships. All communication equipment capable of reaching off-world had been destroyed. The survivors had no means of requesting assistance, or even confirming that the Imperium still existed. This complete absence of external contact created an atmosphere of uncertainty and despair. It was in this darkness that Colonel Jerton's leadership forged the foundation of what would become the Death Korps. He recognized that survival required absolute discipline and an unwavering commitment to Imperial doctrine. He implemented strict protocols that governed every aspect of underground life. He understood that the survivors represented the last loyal Imperial citizens, carrying the responsibility to preserve Imperial values and, one day, reclaim their world. A formal military hierarchy was established. The familiar structure of Imperial Guard Command provided psychological stability for survivors who had lost everything. Military discipline ensured that critical decisions regarding resource allocation and work assignments will be made based on strategic necessity, not emotion. Rationing systems were implemented, allocating calories based on work assignments. Water consumption was heavily regulated. Medical challenges were immense. Radiation exposure symptoms appeared among many survivors, and medical supplies were exhausted within weeks. The survivors began to adapt to permanent underground existence. Sleeping areas were reconfigured. Workshops were created to maintain equipment and repair clothing. Teams were organized to maintain life support, monitor radiation, and preserve the military equipment that would be necessary for the future. Other groups focused on food production, using hydroponic systems improvised from available materials. The preservation of Imperial doctrine and military traditions became the central focus of daily life. Regular prayer sessions honored the Emperor and reinforced the religious foundations of service. Veterans shared their knowledge with younger survivors, ensuring that military expertise would be preserved. A distinct cultural identity began to emerge. The constant awareness of the radioactive death surrounding them created a fatalistic mindset, one that embraced sacrifice as both necessary and honorable. The survivors came to understand that their continued existence was a form of penance for their world's fall to chaos. Their duty to the Emperor now required them to endure any hardship. The development of specialized equipment began. Standard issue respirators were enhanced with additional filtration. Protective clothing was layered with improvised shielding. These early systems were crude, but they were a start. The first experimental surface missions occurred approximately 6 months after the bombardment. Volunteers wearing the improvised gear made brief excursions to assess conditions and recover useful materials. They understood they faced significant risks of death, but their willingness to accept these dangers demonstrated the dedication that would characterize all future Death Korps operations. The reconnaissance revealed the full extent of the transformation. The massive hive cities were reduced to twisted, radioactive ruins. The industrial complexes were gone. The transportation networks were severed. During these missions, they discovered other, smaller survivor groups, civilians who had taken shelter in improvised bunkers or natural caves. These survivors were integrated into the military communities, carefully screened for loyalty and discipline. Communication networks were established between the different bunker complexes, using messengers equipped with the best protective gear, who were forced to traverse kilometers of radioactive wasteland. Improvised workshops began to produce replacement parts, protective gear, and simple weapons. The most experienced veterans were appointed as officers, and younger survivors were organized into squads. A new military was being born. The psychological transformation solidified. The survivors embraced mortality as a means of achieving spiritual redemption. Their daily reality created an intimate familiarity with death. They understood that their ultimate purpose was to serve the Emperor, regardless of personal cost. This was the birth of the Death Korps of Krieg. For years, the survivors of Krieg endured, multiplying in their underground bunkers, their culture of penitence and sacrifice hardening into an unbreakable doctrine. When they finally re-established contact with the Imperium, they offered not a request for aid, but a tithe of soldiers, regiments forged in the most hostile environment imaginable. The Imperium, in its endless need, soon found a use for these grim, anonymous soldiers. The fortress world of Vrax Prime, located along critical supply routes in the Segmentum Solar, had fallen. Vrax served as a massive ammunition depot and staging area for the Imperial Guard. Its surface bristled with defensive installations and underground storage complexes. Cardinal Zaffin, a figure who had arrived on Vrax as part of a routine ecclesiastical inspection, had risen to power. Through patient subversion, he had compromised the planet's command structure and, backed by the planet's extensive PDF forces, declared independence from Imperial authority. The fortress world's isolation and self-sufficiency meant the rebellion could sustain itself indefinitely, and its vast stockpiles of ammunition could fuel heretical armies for years. The initial Imperial response involved conventional siege warfare tactics. Veteran Imperial Guard regiments were deployed, establishing siege lines and beginning orbital bombardment. These conventional tactics failed. Within months, it became apparent that the Vrax defenders possessed capabilities far exceeding normal PDF forces. Their defensive systems had been enhanced, suggesting external assistance. Their strategies were masterful, minimizing their exposure while inflicting maximum casualties. The Adeptus Munitorum, facing a bloody stalemate, reassessed. The situation required specialists. It required soldiers who were masters of attritional warfare, who could operate in contaminated environments, and who would not break, no matter the cost. The decision was made. The Death Korps of Krieg were deployed. It was the largest single commitment of Krieg's forces since their recognition. 12 full regiments of Death Korps infantry, supported by armor battalions and artillery companies, were transported to the Vrax system. This represented nearly 40% of the Death Korps' total strength. The Imperium was committed to resolving the situation, regardless of cost. The Death Korps' initial assessment revealed the challenge. The fortress complexes incorporated multiple layers of defensive positions, channeling attackers into predetermined killing zones. Underground tunnel networks allowed defenders to reinforce any threatened area, safe from orbital bombardment. The Death Korps siege lines were established. Their engineers immediately began construction of extensive trench networks. allowing their forces to approach enemy positions while protected from defensive fire. This was the warfare they were born for. The trench warfare that characterized the Vrax campaign was the Death Korps' most natural form of combat. Their training and equipment were optimized for this grinding, attritional war. Their standard tactics emphasized patient advancement, using coordinated infantry assaults supported by overwhelming, concentrated artillery bombardments. These methods required enormous expenditures of ammunition and personnel, but they provided reliable results. The Krieg artillery companies deployed their specialized siege equipment, Earthshaker cannons for long-range bombardment, Basilisks for mobile support, and Medusa siege guns, which proved particularly effective against the reinforced bunkers. The systematic reduction of the outer defensive positions required months of coordinated operations. Each complex was subjected to prolonged artillery bombardment before infantry assaults eliminated the remaining defenders. The Corps' willingness to accept heavy casualties allowed them to maintain constant, unrelenting pressure. As the Imperial forces penetrated deeper, the war moved underground. Here, the Death Korps' specialized training proved decisive. Their engineers, masters of tunnel warfare, used explosives to create new passages while collapsing enemy tunnels. The Death Korps' approach to casualties reflected their fundamental acceptance of death. Commanders planned operations based on strategic objectives, not casualty minimization. They accepted losses that would have been considered catastrophic by any conventional Imperial Guard unit. The Siege of Fortress Complex Alpha 7 illustrated their method. The complex consisted of multiple reinforced bunkers, connected by tunnels, with overlapping fields of fire. The Death Korps' response involved simultaneous attacks against multiple points in the defensive perimeter, forcing the defenders to divide their fire. The preliminary bombardment of Alpha 7 continued for 6 days. Death Korps artillery units fired over 12,000 rounds, targeting not only visible positions, but also suspected underground facilities. The infantry assault began, with 3 Death Korps regiments advancing simultaneously from different directions. The 143rd Infantry Regiment approached from the north, the 88th from the east, and the 291st from the south. The breakthrough came after 18 hours of continuous, brutal combat. The 143rd Regiment suffered 60% casualties during their assault on the northern positions, but their sacrifice allowed the 88th Regiment to penetrate the fortress perimeter and establish a foothold within the complex. The 291 Estes diversionary attack drew defensive fire away, enabling the breakthrough. Inside, flamethrower teams cleared bunkers and tunnels. Demolition specialists collapsed defensive positions that could not be taken by direct assault. The capture of Alpha 7 was the first major breakthrough of the siege. This tactical template was used for the remainder of the campaign. The systematic destruction of Vrax's defensive network continued for over a decade. The final phase involved operations against the planet's central fortress complex, where Cardinal Zaffin had his command center. These installations incorporated defensive features that demonstrated clear evidence of chaos, corruption, and supernatural enhancement. The ultimate victory of Vrax came after 17 years of continuous siege. The Death Korps casualties during the campaign exceeded 70% of their deployed strength. Some individual regiments suffered complete destruction while achieving their assigned objectives, but they had succeeded where conventional forces had failed. Their reputation was sealed in blood. To understand how the Death Korps achieve such victories, one must understand how they are structured. Their organization reflects both standard Imperial Guard principles and the unique adaptations of their specialized role. Death Korps infantry regiments are large, consisting of approximately 4,000 personnel organized into 5 battalions. This structure provides commanders with the tactical flexibility to conduct simultaneous operations while maintaining reserves. Crucially, each battalion includes a dedicated engineering company. These are not standard engineers. They are demolition specialists, tunnel warfare experts, and fortification builders, all with specialized training in underground combat. Company organization emphasizes small unit cohesion for the close-quarters combat of a siege. A company contains 4 platoons of 50 soldiers, with each platoon divided into 5 squads of 10. The 10-man squad is the core. It includes a sergeant, a Vox operator, 2 specialists with heavy weapons like flammers or meltaguns, and 6 riflemen. This provides the firepower and communication necessary for complex assault operations. Death Korps armor regiments operate primarily as sustained fire support for the infantry. They consist of 3 armored battalions, equipped with Lehman Russ variants optimized for sieges, battle cannons for fortified positions, demolisher tanks for bunker busting, and executioner tanks for precision strikes. The artillery regiments are perhaps the most critical component. They are masters of sustained bombardment. They field heavy artillery batteries of Earthshaker cannons and Medusa siege guns, capable of engaging targets from beyond the range of enemy fire. They also utilize self-propelled Basilisk platforms that can advance with the infantry, providing immediate fire support. Artillery observers, attached directly to the infantry, possess the authority to call for immediate fire support without requiring approval from higher headquarters, ensuring lethal, rapid responses. But the most unique element of the Corps is the role of its commissars. In conventional Imperial Guard units, commissars primarily serve to maintain discipline and prevent cowardice. In the Death Korps of Krieg, they often find themselves restraining overly aggressive soldiers who seek glorious martyrdom without regard for tactical objectives. The Death Korps soldier rarely requires motivation to advance. They require restraint to prevent tactically unsound attacks that waste personnel. The commissars assigned to Krieg must manage this fatalistic enthusiasm, channeling it toward achieving objectives rather than meaningless sacrifice. The distinctive arsenal of the Death Korps reflects their origins and their specialization. The primary infantry weapon is the Lucius pattern Lasgun. It is chosen not for its power, but for its exceptional reliability and ease of maintenance under adverse conditions. It features enhanced barrel cooling for sustained firefights and a reinforced stock. The power cell compartment is environmentally sealed to prevent contamination from radioactive particles or chemical agents. The weapon is modified with enlarged trigger guards to accommodate the thick gloves of their protective equipment. The standard-issue bayonet is a specialized entrenching tool. This robust, serrated edge tool serves as a digging implement, a wire cutter, and a brutal close combat weapon. Special weapons are chosen for their effectiveness against fortifications. Flammers carry enhanced fuel capacity and additives that increase burning temperature, ensuring maximum effectiveness in bunkers. Meltaguns are prioritized for bunker busting and feature specialized targeting equipment to engage small firing ports. Plasma guns feature enhanced cooling systems to reduce the risk of overheating during the sustained engagements that define Krieg doctrine. And then there is the uniform. The heavy greatcoat worn by all personnel provides multiple layers of protection against shrapnel, chemical splashes, and radioactive contamination. Its high collar supports the sealed connection points for the respirator system. The respirator is the most critical component of their gear, reflecting their irradiated homeworld. These devices feature multi-stage filtration systems capable of removing radioactive, chemical, and biological contaminants. The sealed design creates positive pressure, preventing the infiltration of harmful substances. Its integrated communication system allows clear voice transmission while maintaining the sealed environment. Finally, the symbolic skull motifs adorn their equipment. These Death's Head emblems reinforce the Corps' acceptance of mortality and serve as a constant reminder of their dedication to service, regardless of personal survival. Their tactical doctrine is simple: methodical advancement through coordinated infantry assaults supported by concentrated artillery. They construct elaborate trench systems for defense, incorporating specialized techniques for underground construction. They understand that siege warfare is a contest of endurance, and they're prepared to outlast any foe, accepting heavy casualties as the inevitable price of victory. Who is the soldier beneath the mask and greatcoat? The psychological conditioning that transforms an ordinary human into a Death Korps soldier begins at birth. In the underground hive cities of Krieg, children grow up surrounded by the constant reminder of their world's radioactive devastation. From their earliest memories, they are taught that their very existence is a temporary reprieve from the death that claimed billions of their ancestors. The educational systems emphasize collective guilt for Krieg's fall to heresy. Each generation is taught that they bear responsibility for their forebears' betrayal. This inherited shame is the foundation of their culture of redemptive sacrifice. Indoctrination encompasses every aspect of life. Children learn to recite litanies of penitence before they master basic literacy. Their play activities revolve around mock battles, where martyrdom for the Emperor represents the highest achievement. Skull motifs are everywhere, reinforcing the message that individual survival holds no value compared to service. This belief system creates a culture where soldiers actively seek opportunities to demonstrate their devotion. Survival, especially in situations where comrades have died, may be viewed with suspicion rather than relief, as potential evidence of insufficient dedication. The anonymity of the mask is central to this culture. The concealment of individual features reinforces the collective nature of their service. Personal identity matters less than unit cohesion. Soldiers rarely remove their breathing apparatus in the presence of others, creating a culture where individual personality becomes irrelevant. Personnel are often identified by numerical designations rather than names. This suppression of identity creates a unique form of military brotherhood, based on shared experience and mutual dependence rather than personal relationships. This cohesion survives the loss of individual members without disrupting morale. Family relationships are similarly redefined. Children are raised communally, their primary loyalty sworn to the Emperor, not to personal bonds. The Corpsman's relationship with death is an active embrace of mortality as the means of achieving spiritual redemption. Their theological understanding teaches that each soldier's death in service helps to balance the cosmic debt created by their world's fall. This is why they are willing to accept casualties that would be considered catastrophic by any other standard. It is not a callous disregard for human life, but rather a sophisticated theological understanding of death's role in achieving their collective salvation. Commemoration of the fallen follows rituals that emphasize their contribution to this redemption, not their individual loss. Memorial services focus on the tactical objectives achieved through their sacrifice. The Death Korps' understanding of victory itself is different. Operations that achieve their objectives with minimal casualties may be viewed as less significant than missions that require enormous sacrifices. They believe that redemption requires suffering, and that easy victories provide insufficient opportunity to demonstrate proper penitence. The Death Korps of Krieg has earned its reputation as the Imperium's premier siege specialist through participation in dozens of major campaigns, far beyond the legendary 17-year Siege of Vrax. In the Siege of Mord and Tertius, they adapted their techniques to urban combat within a functioning hive city, fighting floor by floor while minimizing civilian casualties through precision tactics. The recruitment and training infrastructure on Krieg operates as a perpetual machine of military production. The underground cities serve as both civilian settlements and military training facilities, where every citizen understands their ultimate purpose. The radioactive environment itself ensures that only the hardiest individuals survive, a natural selection process that produces recruits already adapted to harsh conditions. Their reputation throughout the Imperial Guard is one of profound, if grim, respect. Conventional commanders appreciate their reliability, but are often unnerved by their apparent disregard for self-preservation. Space Marine chapters, particularly the Imperial Fists, value their expertise in defensive operations and their sheer determination. The Adeptus Mechanicus maintains positive relationships with the Corps, appreciating their meticulous maintenance of equipment and their willingness to fight in the most hazardous, contaminated industrial zones. Today, Death Korps regiments are engaged in sieges defensive campaigns, and urban warfare missions across the galaxy. They fight alongside Cadian shock troops, supporting Adeptus Mechanicus cohorts, and cleansing worlds tainted by chaos. They wage attritional warfare against the orcs and hold defensive lines against the Tyranids. Their willingness to accept heavy casualties buying time for other Imperial forces to execute decisive counterattacks. The enduring nature of their atonement reflects their understanding that redemption requires not just service, but sustained generational excellence. Each successful campaign is but a small step toward balancing the cosmic debt. The perpetual cycle of sacrifice defines their existence. The radioactive environment of Krieg, which makes normal life impossible, serves as a constant reminder of their past sins, while simultaneously forging the very soldiers capable of the ultimate sacrifice. The Death Korps of Krieg stands as the Imperium's ultimate expression of redemption through service. Their regiments are living monuments to the power of faith in the Emperor's cause. In the grim darkness of the 41st millennium, the Death Korps embodies a fundamental truth: that survival requires constant vigilance, and that the price of freedom must be paid in blood by those willing to sacrifice everything for humanity's future. Their legacy continues to grow with each campaign, each siege, and each life willingly given in service to the God Emperor of mankind.